that I am also signed in as Melissa Mills.
That's because I'm signed in on your computer and you're signed in.
I'm on my telephone.
Oh, well, there you go. She's
Same
a part of me,
account.
guys. This is all
And
of us
we
doing.
lost him.
We fucked around and become one.
There he is.
Yep. He's just talking away.
And he's dead.
All right. Glenn, I'm glad to see you, bud. Okay, so let's talk about the value of what we have today with this modern day iteration of what we call Also True. I will say this before I get started. I had an email correspondence with Jack Donovan the other day that I got to read the preface to his new book, and I assure you it's going to once again be a fantastic book. I don't know if you've read any of his other work, but it's going to be good. I promise you that much. But we have to look at how all of this works together. Sometimes the best way to do that is start at the beginning. Jason, you were talking about having to read the culture of the Teutons. But if we go further back than that, and I wrote about it in I don't know who did that, but that's all right. Anyway, when I wrote Life and the Love of Life, I made some pretty astounding assertions. We have the Solutrean hypothesis that is anchored heavily on the Clovis point, which is tens of thousands of years old, that suggests there was a pathway between Europe and North America before the last ice age. And then we have all of a sudden had this deforesting of the Amazon and the uncovering of hinges that are the exact same size and dimension as hinges in England. And the other day they released a deal of that there is rock art in the Amazon that is 12,000 years old. Now, this flies in the face of everything we've been taught. I see you. And in the establishment of a trans-Pacific route. Now, science is going to tell you one thing. Anthropology is going to tell you one thing. Mythology and religion will tell you quite another. At the edges of the equatorial regions, above the Tropic of Cancer and your northern regions, there is your hunter-gatherer tribes, those communities that followed the great herds, that followed the flow of life across the surface of the world to hunt and to gather and eat. And they have a set of traditions centered around ancient sky gods and the possession of a spear. And then you have around the equatorial part of the world is where your ancient mythologies of planting and harvesting originate. And, well, that's not what I want either. Let's see if I can do this, because I don't want to break up. How about now? How's the sound now? Is it clear now? Because I was told it was breaking up. Good deal. That's what I wanted to hear. Anyway, around the equatorial regions, particularly around the headhunter regions of Indonesia, you have the origins of your planting and harvesting myths. The yam, maize, corn. Interestingly enough, you have Asian cotton being grown in Peru 12,000 years ago. So there's a real link that circumnavigates the globe of these planting myths. There's always a feminine spirit. There's always death. There's always the planting of the parts of the body of that feminine spirit, and from that originate the foods from which men eat. And that mythology goes around the world, all around the equatorial region. The hunter-gatherer myths, you have your hunter-gatherers, like I said. In your hunter-gatherer tales, the beings that they kill to eat represent the connection to divinity. In the farming communities, the people that are sacrificed represent the divinity. So in the coming of age ceremonies of your Indonesian tribes, a group of boys would be coming of age. There would be a big community celebration and feast. And the members of the community would take several large, big, heavy logs and put them up on a platform. And at the end of this ceremony, they would bring the prettiest girl and set her underneath that platform. And the boys would take turns. They would come through there. They would embrace the feminine divine, and then they would walk out the other side as a man. And the last man that went in there, the last boy that went in there, as they embraced, the members of the community would yank out the supports and the logs would fall and crush them. And that was their sacrifice. We look at that and we think terrifying things. We look at that and we realize, well, yeah, it probably was a real easy sell for a Christian missionary to come in and say, oh, no, you ain't got to do that anymore. Our God sacrificed himself for you. But we weren't raised in that community. Now, that young woman and that boy, they considered themselves to be the aspects of a god and goddess when they were sacrificed. The members of that community were simply setting those individuals free. And this is the important part. That idea of an individual being sacrificed, be it a cow, a pig, a goat, a human, all through your farming communities, that sacrifice was the deity. It was simply being freed to return back to that whence it came. In your hunter-gatherer tribes, the animals that they hunt and ate and provide their sustenance, they were the divinity. And the community considered it a holy duty to set that divine being free. Now, those are the oldest myths known to man. And even back into the Neanderthals, into the last ice age of 75,000 to 200,000 years ago, in between the ice ages, there's all kinds of archaeological evidence that they considered aspects of their environment to be divine. I've said many, many times, whenever a community moved into a region, they incorporated themselves into the environment in which they lived. And in doing so, they saw the divine in everything around them. Now, so in this day and age, how do we do that? We have to look at how the mythology grows and develops. So when it comes to the time that you have your Northern European communities, you have the First War, the legend of the First War. You have the Vanir, which represent the passionate aspects of the earth, literally a migration of those farming myths north. And you have the austere, high-minded sky gods of the hunter-gatherers settling into one region in Northern Europe. Now, how do the two combine? Well, there's going to be a bit of a tussle. Which one's more important? Do I need to be gathering in the woods? Do I need to be hunting? Or should I stay here and plant some of the crops that moved north? There are more than 30 different species of crops that we take for granted that originated in the equatorial belt of the world that we now consider hot chocolate, tobacco, yams, the lima bean, corn, maize. All of that stuff originated in the central part of the world and went north. Somewhere they were meeting. Somewhere there was trade being established. Somewhere there was a meeting of minds. Somewhere there was a unstoppable force against an immovable object. When you look at our mythology and you look at the Aesir-Vanir War, most people get distracted or confused by the idea that, oh, he was burning Gullveig. That horse shit, I don't know who put that out there, but they need to be tarred and feathered for creating that. And we've got all these fucking heathen women wearing Stevie Nicks kind of fucking dresses pretending to be witchy, which is horse shit. And I've said it many times and I'll stand by it until the day I die. The Aesir-Vanir War was not about Gullveig, the love of gold entering the golden age. Look, if you got somebody that shows up at your dinner party that's stealing the flatware, you're going to be pissed about it. And that's kind of what they're talking about there. Golveg, the love of gold, showed up to the golden age of Asgard with the bewitching one, the one that bewitches men's minds, and the horse thief that robbed men of the ability to work with each other. The three all-powerful female Jotuns. It says not once, but twice in the Eddas. So there's a real clear delineation there. Odin tries to rid his community of that concept of greed. Some people want to complain. They don't like that I say that, and I don't care. But when the Vanir come, the passionate gods of fertility of the earth, they ask one question. Should worship belong to one group of gods, or should it belong to all? That's the question. Not, hey, you burnt Golveg. They say, should worship belong to one or not to all? Odin, being the austere high god and the one that runs the hunter-gatherer, the powerful masculine image that has killed a mammoth with a pointed stick instead of digging in the dirt with it, throws his spear over them all and promptly gets his ass whipped. Now, men go through life. Men go through life and they build great things and they do big things and they feel important about themselves and they're sailing along. And sure enough, at some point, regret will rear its ugly head as the crone. And men will begin to question. It shows up in the Arthurian legends. When the land and the king are both sick, the land and the king are one. They're both suffering. And he's failed in some way. He's failed in his relationship with Guinevere. She has gone on to something bigger and better with Sir Lancelot. But the point is that at a certain point in every man's life, he's going to come up against a wall. And he's going to have to face his own shortcomings. And he's going to have to face where he failed. Okay? The beauty of our mythology, the beauty of what we call this faith, the promise, the hope, the ideas, the thing that sustains us and gives us the power to believe in this is that from those very, very, very ancient myths that are tens of thousands of years old, they were combined. And during the Aesir-Vanir War, and Odin lost, he went wandering, like most men do. We begin to wander and we look and we ask why. And we take a look around the world and we're like, I don't know. Maybe I should do this, and maybe I should do that. The Western way of man is always to look for something out there to conquer. The Western way of man is always to look for some great dragon to slay to prove their masculinity outside of themselves. The Eastern philosophies take a much different approach towards life. They consider that the mastery of the human body to be the pinnacle of spirituality. Julian Apostate points it out in the Mispogonon when he says, what is a god but a being that knows himself so much more intimately than a regular man will? Not can, but will. And in that knowing finds within himself limitless potential. So there's a real interesting soup being brewed, revolving around the ability of men to become something more, and women. So you have to remember that in that society that we call our ancestors, women had the right to seek divorce. Women had the right to own land. The dowry was set aside there so that if anything happened to the husband, the woman would always be taken care of. She had rights. She was free. Our ancestors created that shit, not anybody else. Our ancestors. I'm not talking about the rabid feminazi horseshit that runs amok in most of society today. I'm talking about the right of people to stand next to each other as equals in much different patterns. So as it begins to brew down and Odin begins to wander, he doesn't go and slay some great dragon like Sigurd does. Odin goes and sacrifices himself to himself. I want you to consider that very carefully. What does that mean? How do I sacrifice myself to myself? How do I learn who I am? What do I do to get myself and my destructive thoughts out of my own way? Because the greatest problems that I come up with are problems of my own making, my own thought process. The best thinking I could come up with is put me in the shittiest situations in the world. How do I get that out of my way? How do I stop that thought process? Odin's is fairly simple. Sacrificing himself to himself, we're looking at the literal death of the ego. Every person that even considers the use of psychedelic drugs throughout ancient times in history and the records of it, they all say it is one thing. It is the death of the ego. And those people most absorbed by it will say, well, no, you got to have that. No, you fucking don't. You ever seen a Shaolin monk proud of himself? Talk to me when you figure that out. Then he comes back. And the hostages are exchanged at the end of the Aesir-Vanir War. And what does Odin do once he gets out of his own way? He creates a community that represents the best of both worlds. When you bring Freya and Frey and Njord into your tribe, Njord, this god of the sea, this master of both fire and ice, this is a powerful entity of his own world. The sea represents so much bounty and abundance, we could hardly fathom what it might mean to a community that lived on the edge of a coast in those ancient times that could simply throw a net into the sea or kill a whale and feast for days and days and days, if not all winter. And his two children, the divine twins, Frey and Freya, both of whom have a golden boar. What would that golden boar be for? To ride into battle as a terrifying entity? Yes, that's true. But the mythology also suggests that the boar taught man how to plant. The boar taught the northern tribes how to plant things by rooting up the ground with its tusk. And as seeds fell into that soft, turned up earth, things began to grow. And men began to learn how to, hunter-gatherers began to learn how to grow their own food. They are passion and abundance and love. In the austere communities of men, manly men hunting mammoths with a stick. And women that were sitting there skinning the hide and chewing the hide with their tusks so they could have a fur or whatever. This represents an advancement, an order of magnitude greater than any other spirituality of ancient times that we might come across. We are looking at the very rudiments of some of Carl Jung's most fantastic work that benefit the ideas of therapy and helping individuals grow today, both mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. The idea that the ego should be shed so that you might incorporate both masculine and feminine into your life to become something much greater. It doesn't really stop there, though. Because in the midst of all of that greatness, in the midst of that melding of a magnificent community that represents the best of the austere, high-minded spirituality of the high-flying eagle and the sky gods, as well as the fertility of the earth itself and the abundance and passion that it represents, because that's what the Aesir are. They are the best aspects of all of it melded into one, in the communities that built kingdoms upon which the sun never set. Those Anglo-Saxon tribes and Celts and everything else that settled into England formed a melting pot that built an empire upon which the sun never set. Think about that. They influenced the very Declaration of Independence that founded this country. Thomas Jefferson was enamored of the Anglo-Saxon chieftains of old as he was attending Oxford. And it shows in the freedoms that he writes about in our Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, and Constitution. While they may be influenced by Greek, they are also heavily influenced by those Anglo-Saxon chieftains and Thomas Jefferson's influence. So when we look at this ancient mythology, can we so callously dismiss it as old-time myths? Or is there something very deep there that allows us to become something more? Well, does it continue to grow? Does it continue to develop? Do we find within it the idea that within each of us, there might be something very special that allows us to make it through the toughest of times? Is there something there that gives us the strength to carry on when life seems like it may not be worthwhile? Is there something for the children to follow? In the midst of all of that greatness, the best and brightest of them from whose home fewest baleful runes lie, Balder perishes. The death of the individual to show up in a new realm. Any solar deity cult, such as the cult of Mithras in the 1st century of Iran, a solar cult. Even the induction into the Masonic today, in the Masons today, there is a spiritual, a symbolic death of the individual and a rebirth in front of a shining light. There is the rebirth of the individual. For the cult of Mithras, you were literally put into a pit, a bull was put over you, and they cut that bull's throat, and you were drowned in the blood of that beast. And when you emerged, you were reborn into something new under a bright Mediterranean sun. And it was a powerful and influential cult. Do I have that in my old faith? Do I have the idea that I might set some of this old shit aside and become something new, to take a new path, to walk away from the petty jealousies, anxieties, greed, and all the other nonsense that seems to be corrupting the community and society from which I emerge? The death of Balder is just such an event. And the power of love is such that Nanna perishes with him, and they take a new path. So when I hear people talk about Asatru as not being a fully well-rounded spirituality, I find that I'm talking to a fool. When I see people shortchange the ideas of this pagan belief as if it might not be worthwhile, just in a short dissertation here, I find powerful ideas that resonate throughout time to the human condition of existing on this earth. Now, what do we do with it? Do we continue to look at these ancient paths and old books and study it as if it's the religion with homework? Or do we begin to bring it into reality and look at the paths upon which these great beings that we so admire travel? The lesson continues with Sigurd. As he slays that dragon, he begins to understand in the question and answer scenario that happens between Sigurd and Fafnir that maybe he's made a mistake fighting an external enemy. Let me assure you, there are no external enemies. I don't give a shit how much you think that something out there is out to get you. It's always going to be your reaction to it, your ability to deal with it, that determines whether or not they win. Always. No matter what, hands down, bar none, I don't give a shit what you want to call it. If somebody's running at you with a bayonet, it's going to be your ability to react to it that determines if you win or not. But in today's peaceful world, the greatest threats we face are internal enemies. And what do those thoughts about external enemies do for us? They feed our ego. I feel awfully powerful and righteously indignant when I begin to look at the horseshit being foisted upon us about this pandemic and COVID-19 and every other silly ass conspiracy. It's all there. All of it is there. And you know what all of it does? It keeps me from becoming what I'm supposed to become. It keeps me from being able to set aside some of these petty indifferences. I've got to figure out how to deal with that if I ever expect to become something more. If I ever expect to walk into the golden years of my own life as something that means more to my grandchildren and children than just, that's Pawpaw. He's a little angry about things. That is not how I'm going to be perceived. Our spirituality has an answer for every aspect of life we wish to contend with. All we have to do is get out of our own way to embrace that. Shawnee's the one that taught me about my first thoughts. I have created so much destruction in my own life because I got a dumb idea in my head and raised hell about it until I was forced to do nothing more than strike a match and burn it all down and walk away from it. That was my ego. That was my own self-destructive behaviors. How do I free myself from that? Well, I got Odin's example, don't I? I got Sigurd's example too. After the dragon is slayed, Sigurd begins to realize that his enemy is not who he really thought it was. He's been lied to and told that that over there is your enemy. That's who you need to kill. And he believed it. He bought into it. We're being sold the same bill of goods every day. Every time you turn on the evening news, you're being told who the enemy is, who the bad guy is. People will go and fight that. People will go and hate that. People will do this, that, and the other. Not one time will they sit there and say, oh, how so? How does that affect how I put food on the table? Now, after he slays that dragon, after he becomes aware of who he is and slays the true enemy, the one closest to him, the one lying to him, once he comes to grip with and understands the language of the birds, which is his full incorporation into the environment in which he lives, then he has what it takes to cross the flames that surround a woman's heart. Not before. Not until after he has slain the dragons within himself does he have what it takes to cross the flames. And even then, after he crosses those flames, the first thing he sees is not a woman in a burning. The first thing he sees is a soldier. It isn't until he removes that mask, it isn't until he removes the helm of awe, the helm of fear, that defensive shield that every man walks through society with to keep the bad people at bay so I don't get hurt. Once he removes that, then he recognizes who he sees. It's a woman in a burning. And he cuts her free and awakes her. Now, yeah, I'm kind of talking in circles about a lot of things here, but that's where the true greatness of who we are is established. In the same manner that Balder takes a path away from the petty things that are still happening in the society from which he emerged and joins with a woman to take a new path of life to a brighter future, so too does Sigurd do the same thing with Brunhild. And she offers him a memory draught and reminds him of who he is. It's not his buddy. It's not anything else. Once he gets rid of his ego, once he sets aside the helm of awe and becomes aware of who he's dealing with, because he's set aside his figuratively and literally his ego and his defense mechanisms, then a woman reminds him of who he truly is and teaches him the use of the runes and the path of life. Not before. It's the same thing with Odin. Until he sacrifices himself to himself, until he is cut down screaming after he hears the songs of his ancestors, that's when he picks up the crystallized knowledge of his ancestors in the shape of the runes, the path of life, path of every man's life. See, there's certain patterns in all of that we need to understand, and they all originate in myths that are tens of thousands of years old from all over the world that culminate into this bright, shining example of what it means to be Asatru. And we've got 4 decades of negative publicity to overcome to be the example of what that means. We cannot do that by indulging in the petty bullshit I see being so often foisted as, well, that's what it really means to be Asatru. Oh, how so? Because that's the question I'm going to ask. And then I'm going to look down my nose at them. Why? I'll tell you why, because I'm Brian Wilton. Go take a bath. My counterpart, she's yeah, that's what I live with. So for me to be a daddy to a little girl, I got to be able to do all that stuff. I got to be able to relate. I got to be able to get out of my own way. And there's one thing Astru's taught me and helped me realize more than anything else is that when you look at your child, you realize I'm all they got. And that means I got to live up to some big ass standards. Ostru helps me do that. At any rate, that is my idea about Ostru. That is why I follow it. That's why I believe in it. That's why I don't deviate from it. That's what gives me the strength to walk boldly and bravely as a prince shall go, boldly till his day of death come. Bravely and gladly a prince shall go. Yeah, that's exactly right. What greater promises could we have? There's a lot of things I'll speak about. The ability to love your partner, the ability to love your children. Guys, we can't get that part of it down out of the lore. I don't give a shit what kind of degree you have in the history of this shit. You got to be able to figure out how to be bold and brave and be willing to love. That's what it all boils down to. So that's another thing too. I keep watching some of this stuff on YouTube, and I know that I shouldn't, but it does get me aggravated. Why does it seem that the majority of men and women are committed to the avoidance of pain? I don't want to do that. I'm going to play this little game because I don't want to get hurt. Why don't we set that aside and just go on in it and quit playing games and be with who we're supposed to be and give it all we got? Here I am. Let's do it. Sometimes life hurts, guys. I mean, I could talk about all this stuff all day long, but sometimes it's going to come the realization that life is tough and it's going to be hard. And there's going to be a point where you got to sit down and cry. Somebody you love is going to die. Somebody that you love is going to leave you. Somebody that you care about, you're going to lose. You're going to get sick. You're going to have heartache. You're going to deal with all kinds of letdowns in life. There's going to be valleys. There's good, if we can't look at this spirituality and figure out the ways to make it through the valleys of this world and bear up under the load of life itself, what are we fucking doing? Playing reenactment? I hate to make fun of those LARPers. Most of the time I look at them, they seem pretty happy to me, but that's what this spirituality's got to boil down to. Help these individuals make it through the valleys of life. Nobody gives a fuck what that ancestor was eating. They want to know how to make it through this deal. Well, the factory I was going to work at until I retired, somebody sold that factory and now it's shut down. And now I'm 50 years old and don't have a job. Now what do? How's it going to help them make it through that valley? That's what we need to know. Oh, wait a minute. I'm 24 years old. I got a college degree. The woman that I love left me for somebody else. How do I make it through that valley? Oh, wait a minute. This man that I loved with all of my heart, all of a sudden, he's whipping my ass on a nightly basis. How do I deal with that valley? Oh, wait a minute. The state's going to take my kids away. How do I deal with that valley? Wait a minute. I'm strung out. I'm so strung out. I don't know, come here from Sikkim because I've been smoking crack for 3 fucking weeks. How am I going to make it through that valley? We got to figure out how to help those people. That's where this has got to come from. Oh, wait a minute. My buddy just got shot in a combat operation. How do I make it through that valley? Because they're still fucking shooting at me. How do you make it through that valley? Because that's what this is all about. We have tens of thousands of years, all kinds of information that will feed our brain, that will feed our spirit, that will embolden our heart, that will give us what it takes to strengthen our bodies, to be the perfect vehicle to travel the surface of this world. And we want to pretend we know something because we read this book or that book. Or we'd rather get mad about this or get mad about that. If you're sitting here listening to this part, there's some part of you, inside of you, that says, you know what, I might be worth a little bit more. I might be able to do something important. There's something inside me that keeps saying, I'm more than what I've been in life so far. But we keep finding ourselves in valleys. How do we get out of that valley? Well, first thing we might need to do is change our thought process. That requires the death of our ego. Just like Odin, just like Sigurd, just like Balder, to be born into something new. There's no ceremony for it. I can make one. I can probably make one up for you if that's what you need. But I heard a man say once that for a man to embrace the masculine path, the first thing he has to do is to make a decision upon the path of life that does not rely upon the safety net that mother and father provide for simply being born. And that's the real truth here. Can we begin to make decisions based upon what we've learned in Austrian to help us live a good life, to help us live a happy life, to help us to find a little refuge from grief in our wisdom? That's what it says we can do. Anyway, I'm going to open up the floor. Y'all feel free to ask me some questions because I've covered a lot and said a lot, but in a nutshell, that's what I'm going for with all of this. I'm not going to argue semantics with somebody that studied the history because I really could care less. Tell me how your semantics work when your dad dies. Come talk to me about that shit. Shawnee, I diluted my Jameson with Coke. Hope you don't mind.
Sacrilege.
I know, right?
What are you thinking?
I was thirsty, but I wanted a drink, and it just didn't work. So I was like, "Fuck it, I'm putting."
If you have to mix it, use water. Don't poison the well.
That'd be the first time in history. That'd be the first time in my life. It's actually quite tasty.
I know.
Uh,
Who's vibrating?
Probably Melissa.
Oh, somebody's messaging me.
Anybody have any questions? Because I'm sure I've got a brilliant answer.
I just have to agree. If you want to do great things, you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Steve Harvey said that, and I listened to it the other day, and it was really good.
Right? Gym, work, relationships, all of it.
I should be pretty fucking stellar by the end of this year then, because I've been pretty uncomfortable.
You probably will be.
It'll be like goddess level by the time I get through here.
If it's not uncomfortable, you're not doing it right.
Right?
That's
right.
what growth is all about.
Yep. I think we've all
Growth
been on the
and
accelerated
transformation.
program this year.
What was that?
I think we've all been on the accelerated program this year.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I've been catching some of that discomfort. My ears are pretty good, even though it's weird.
Right. It's been a better year
No.
compared to others. I was thinking about talking about earlier about like the Aesir and the Vanir War.
Yes.
And I was talking to you about that the other night about Manglotum's promise.
Yes.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know what that is.
Spill it.
They don't that's basically why we changed our kindred name. Well, that and because I took over. But we changed it because when you say that, everybody's like, is that just made up? Like they didn't understand what that was at first, but basically all that it is afterwards the Vanir or the Aesir are giving Freya and Frey. Wait, I always mess that stuff up. I'm sorry.
It's all
Talking
right.
out of my butt. But they're being given a gift of abundance and fertility.
They are. They're the very embodiment of the passions and abundance of the children of the earth and the sea being incorporated into the high-minded spirituality of high-flying eagles spirituality. And it really, to bring it together. Now, Mingloth, when you look at this Vipdagsmal, Mingloth, when Oder goes on far journeys, we never really know why he leaves. We never really are told why he leaves. But in this Vipdagsmal, he reappears as Vipdag. That is odor. That is another name or kinning for because it means the swift day. That is odor returning to claim Freya. He's been away on a long journey, and most likely he's died and been reborn and died and been reborn. This is him after he's gone through his passage and true of learning. Mengloth means necklace clad. That is the woman that wears the Brisingamen, Jim. That is Freya. So what you have here is and while it is a 17th century tale, it's also very much a continuation of the idea that these men go away and they learn how to become men, to be the partners they need to be. Now, Freya does go through her thing too. There's the whole thing with 7 dwarves. I don't know what that means. I don't know if she had an orgy with them. I don't know if she just tickled their fancy. Who knows how the divine interacted in that scenario? But there's a lot of women out there right now that are trying to find themselves by dating this man, and dating this man, and dating that man. And we have a very fine divine representation of a woman that said, you know what? That's not where my beauty resides. Mengloth lives on the hill of healing. And it is a hope to all of those women who have suffered. Now, she also does this in the Heimdalljoth, when she calls out to Heimla, her sister under a rock. She calls to a woman she might as well be a low-born gutter slut living under a rock. And this goddess of abundance and fertility and love calls her sister. What a beautiful and amazing thought. That no matter what we've been through, no matter what we've had to go through, it is all necessary for us to be who we're supposed to be today. And sometimes we might look back on it. It might keep us awake at night and it might hurt. But we all had to go through all of that to be who we are. There's no magic words in Asatru that say, well, you're forgiven and all of that is forgotten. No, you don't forget that shit. You needed every single bit of it to become what you're supposed to become today, to be who you're supposed to be with. And if a motherfuckers can't understand that, or can't get past themselves, and can't get over themselves enough to say, you know what, that's life and it's okay. Kick rocks. It's just all there is to it, guys. Kick rocks. I do not have a crystal clear past. I have been a son of a bitch most of my life, especially when I was using and drinking heavily. My kids love to talk about it all the time and make fun of me. But I had to go through every single bit of that to become who I'm supposed to become today. Each part of that is today a learning experience. Each part of that I had to go through means that, okay, yeah, I did that. That was bad. That probably shouldn't have hurt that person that bad. I really shouldn't have done that either. There was no need to be that violent. There was no need to hurt that person. And yet I did it. Why? Why did I do it? 90% of the time when I look at it, you know why I did it? Because I wanted other people to understand how powerful and how important I was, because my ego was magnificent. I wanted other people to understand that they needed to be afraid of me for a reason. I don't have to live that way today. I don't have to be that way today. It sneaks in all the time. Every time I turn around, that thought process is sneaking in and fucking things up. Now I've got a faith that shows me in several different locations, keep trying. You're on this different path. You don't have to live like that anymore. You're on a different path. You have greater opportunities. That's what it's all about. And I'm sorry, Shanae, I digressed and got off of your Mengloth's promise. But that whole thing there is this willingness and this ability to learn from our mistakes and help others make it through that. What greater thing could we do than to help somebody that's under the rock? Call them brother, call them sister. Come on, let's walk for a little while. Let's see if we can do some good. And people get upset. That's a little too Christian. No, that's human. That's what it means to be a person. That's what it means to do right. And there's some people you simply can't help. You got to walk. You got to let them go. But you do your best, because I don't ever want to go back to that. I don't ever want to go back to that. Mostly because it would make headlines. I've already done that once. I didn't like it. But
I think it's.
Go ahead, man.
I was gonna say, just like listening to this kind of just makes me think of that. I can never remember the figure's name. The story of the gift fox, where it says, "Be wary of the gift fox," and he turned into a legend. Just because he was kicked out of his parents' home for being a lazy slash with nothing to offer. And each item and each thing he traded for something greater had a story behind it. You can kind of do that with your own life. Give up something, look back where you're at, trade it for something greater, over and over again.
It's said best in American Gods. At the Odin says, "You give a little, you get a little." I love that.
Right. But without that discomfort and that story that goes with it, doesn't have much value. It's part of the process, part of the game.
Doesn't have much value. But that's the thing, is that the arrogant action of Odin, when he didn't want to share worship with another tribe he considered less than him, and then got his ass kicked. I don't know how many times I've been in that situation. Well, I'm not going to do that. And, and then the next thing you know, well, you're really second best, buddy. You probably better just learn your fucking place. That happens to a lot of men. That happens to a lot of men in their relationships. That happens to a lot of women in their relationships. And we're all trying to figure out, am I man enough? Am I woman enough? And all of a sudden we come across this deal, and it's saying, get rid of your ego. It's saying, grow up a little bit. It's saying, once you sacrifice your ego, here's all of this combined knowledge of the ancestors. It's saying, work with, it's just the simplest thing it could be. Mingloth sets up the hill of healing, and those women that are stricken might go there and find happiness. And there is a group of handmaidens there whose names are these wonderful names that provide hope and encouragement for women to become something more. And there's all these examples of men that go out and fight dragons and then realize it's in here that I got to take care of the most. When you
It's fascinating you mentioned Seven Dwarfs too. I mean, if you take the Disney take on that, what did each of the dwarves represent?
Yeah.
Some exaggerated flaw in their personality. And each one's a man that woman might have had to spend time with and realize it's not a mature and spirit and soul of a man that's got the magnitude or the capability to be what she needs.
Like Peter Pan. That Peter Pan bullshit, the boy that never wants to grow up.
Peter Pan is a sociopath.
It's true. It's true.
It's a good one based off the Grimm fairy tale, that our folklore. There might be something to it.
Listen,
You can't ruin that for me. You cannot ruin Peter Pan for me. It's the ultimate children's story. There's no
Peter
parents.
Pan is
They
a
get to
sociopath.
Listen,
He is a sad, confused little boy who does not want to grow up and be a man, who is always searching for his mommy through another woman, but can never find her. And he thinks solving the problem is going to happen by sprinkling a little pixie dust on everything and calling it good and taking off to Never Neverland. Sorry. No,
I see it. I'll tell you something though. That's a dark path for Peter Pan, and that's cool.
That sounds like
fairy tales. The Grimm's fairy tales are what fairy tales actually are. So I think we'd be best to go off of those rather than Disney's diluted version of what it should be.
Well, right. Peter Pan was written by a really cool guy. His story for writing that, his path to writing that story was actually really awesome. And it was all about the magic of childhood. And if you think about it, that story, there's so much magic in it, because children, when there's no parents around, they're so free. And they have these great imaginations, and they hang out with Indians. They get to fly. They fight pirates. They do all these great things. And then they go home, at the end of it all. But that's how I look at it. Like all that creative stuff that they get to do. It's like the ultimate kid story. Who doesn't want to go do that? Their nanny was a dog.
I loved
I-
it.
I think
Trust
it's a
me,
story
Peter
of
Pan
the
used to be
fear of
my
growing up.
favorite one ever until I dated a Peter Pan.
I knew
One
that
of
was
them who
coming.
never wanted to grow up, and then it changed the story for me a little bit. So now I look at it more on the psychological side versus the free and fancy flights of children.
I'm going to hold on to my fancy flights of children.
Hey,
But when you
I-
find your symbol, let me know.
I got to tell you, if you haven't watched the live action Mulan, you need to. It's good.
Sure, it's much simpler when we don't have to do that. When there's no parents around and we get to, fly with pixie dust and hang out with mermaids and
It sounds
Battle
like
pirates.
it just sounds too much like my years of drug addiction. I just can't do it.
That's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, you walking around with
I
an
mean,
8
just
ball
as
or
far
a
as
quarter
that
ounce
whole
of cocaine in
scenario
your pocket.
goes, that's what I based it on.
Well, it's true. I
was
mean, you walk
that-
into a room and you
That
shake out a
whole
bunch of
thing, that
lies.
relationship shit at the end of it is picture was Peter Pan smoking a pipe.
Yeah, yeah, it's
You
true.
know, it's the psychology of it, and that's how
I've got
I
an awful sense
associated
of
it.
humor, so I got to ask, which one were you, a fairy or a pirate, Brian?
Me?
Yeah,
Man, I've always been a pirate on the Sea of Life.
I was going to go with fairy.
Well, see, a lot of the time, it was once in college, and we don't fucking talk about it anymore.
The experimental period.
I didn't go to college, fuckers.
I would definitely have to say a pirate.
Yes, a pirate.
I would say the pirate. Yeah. Just kidding. You're not a fairy.
I did,
Let
I
me
did-
get my pixie dust.
I did spritz some rose water on my couch the other day, and Shawnee was like, "Don't you ever fucking do that again."
That's a little metrosexual right there.
It was very metrosexual. I felt very confident about it.
till after
Oh,
that.
don't. He did this weird little dance the other night, too. It's like, please don't ever do that again.
Oh, I don't know. President Trump did a weird little dance a couple months ago, and that shit cracks me up. I still go
it
find
was
that
like
video.
the Carlton. It was like
Yes.
the Carlton from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. That's what he was doing. I was
I can
like,
do
no.
that. I can do that dance.
White
At
man
least he
can't
wasn't
dance.
bluffing.
I can
Anyway,
do.
we've veered way off on rabbit trails.
That's because we're.
On
That's
our
'cause-
discussion.
yeah, that's all right. It's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be people having a good time in life. It's okay. But having said all that, I do appreciate everybody's time tonight. I'm gonna get off here because Scarlett's still wearing that Deadpool mask. She's supposed to be getting ready for bed.
That's my liking. All right, you guys have a good night.
All right, guys. I thank you all.
Thank
Have
you,
a good night.
Brian.
Tomorrow's Monday. Grab it by the nose and whip its ass.
Take care, guys.
Bye.